right, so I will call the Thursday, January 5, 2023 Urbandale City Council meeting to order and ask we'll take roll call, please.
Blake?
Here.
Carberry Montgomery? I know she's here. Kroll?
Here.
Obrecht?
Here.
McBurney?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And then I'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by McBurney, second by Kroll. Discussion, roll call, please.
McBurney?
Yes.
Kroll?
Yep.
Blake?
Yeah.
Carberry Montgomery?
Well,
And Obrecht?
Yes.
all right. Bridget, I hope you're still safe. So. All right, thank you for making time today for this special lunch and learn. As you know, we have pending action on the agenda for next week, and AJ and I thought it'd be good just to have a quick meeting to discuss this. And so AJ and Jan and staff have been to put this together, and hopefully we can answer our questions ahead of Tuesday's meeting. And so once we get to the Tuesday meeting, we can get to that and make some decisions. But we thought it'd be good to have a little extra time to discuss this in a special meeting. So AJ, I'll turn it over to you to kick us off.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, I would echo the mayor's sentiment. Thank you for joining us today. I know it's a little off schedule, and we will try to be concise and get you out of here as soon as possible. But again, you know, as the mayor said, you have an item in front of you on the agenda on January 10th that is a significant one. And as our role as staff, we want to make sure we've addressed all your questions, any concerns, anything to make you as best prepared to take your vote on Tuesday night for that issue as possible. And that issue is the setting the date for the public referendum for the community recreation community center that has been discussed for all these several years now. In our presentation today, it's more a slight presentation, but to answer questions. And I just want to give you kind of an overview of how the staff has approached this project. And really in our discussion today, we've kind of broken it down into three phases. And again, we're not going to spend a lot of time on phases that really are beyond us or behind us, if you will. But as we looked at this project, and again, there's been so much discussion that we've had since its inception to this point now, that again, I don't want to reiterate things that you already know to be true and that are behind us. But we've looked at this in the three-phase approach. First is the preparation and conceptual design approach. And that has been everything that began with those initial discussions. Actually, it began in true city fashion as a planning document that was introduced multiple years ago in either the original Parks Master Plan, the revised Park Master Plan, and also incorporated in our recent discussions in our comprehensive plan discussions in the neighborhood meetings, etc. So the discussion about the facility and to have a recreation component more so than what we have on the west side of our community has been the subject of long-standing discussions. So that is the phase one, the preparation, conceptual phase. And we are nearing that end of phase one, which is culminated in the council establishing the vote for the project. And really the final action of phase one would be the vote itself if council is so inclined to establish the vote on March 7th of 2023. That, again, is everything that we've done to this point. And as we examine this issue from the staff perspective, and we're appreciative of the comments that we have heard from council on this, is that I will tell you that everything that you've done to date has prepared you for this action. As I've shared with staff numerous times, the preparation that's gone into this question is almost textbooks. You could write a white paper and present at a conference about how you address or approach a community-based project, regardless of what it is. And so, again, you're nearing that end of it, and this will be the culmination, is your vote to take it to the voters on March 7th. What will happen is really anybody's guess. It's almost unpredictable from the sense of everything that you've done has pointed you to this direction of this is the time to have the vote. There are always influences on voters that we're not aware of or that may influence their vote in the next 3 months. And quite honestly, those are really beyond our control. Everything that you've done and the community has done, and those who have been part of that process can point to this point. The second item that we had, and again, it all is predicated on the fact that you have a vote. And presuming that the vote is positive, then you enter into what we have classified as phase 2, which is the design to bid phase. And the design to bid phase, quite honestly, is a very important component of this because that's where you have authorization. And that's one of those things that, since we don't do a lot of these votes, and Nikki and I were discussing this earlier, that in my tenure at least, and possibly hers, we've only had 2 to 3, maybe 4 public referendums on questions. Fire Station 43, the 2 lost votes we've had, and prior to that, the Project Destiny vote, for those of you who remember back, I think is in 2007, maybe 2008. There was also the other vote in 2007 on a community program that didn't pass. So really, there's about 4 referendums that we as a community have put to the voters. So our experience with that has been dated to a bit, and they have been spaced out. So again, the next phase, going into the design and build phase, if you will, the design to bid phase, is a really critical phase because that will then take you to the bid phase. And we anticipate that if you get a positive vote, that design and bid phase will take you through the remainder of calendar 23. And then you will ideally take a project out to bid in the environment that is most advantageous, which would be the latter part of 23, early 24. Once you have that number, then you have other financial decisions to make. And one important thing that I would like to mention, and this is again because we do so few of these, is that presuming that you get a positive vote on March 7th, that is the authorization to issue debt to build a project. And much like the Fire Station 43, for those of you who remember that, the question said up to $6 million to build a fire station and a fueling station. So you would set an upward limit based on all the information you have now to say this is the upward limit, an authorization to issue debt to spend this much money, up to, in this example, I'll use the number $40 million, which has been the number that we've talked about consistently. So that is your authorization. It doesn't mean you go out and spend money right away. And as I mentioned, you go through the design and bid phase, that will give you a better handle on what your cost of the project is. Much like every other project we do, it goes through a process of planning, and Nikki will touch on that here in a minute in the financial phase, is that you go through a process of planning, design, authorization, and then you find out what the cost of the project is. And then you manage that cost accordingly within the parameters of our financial capabilities. So again, we are assuming that these things fall into play. You are approximately a year away from knowing what the cost of this project would be. And I think that's really important because, again, no issuance of debt will take place until you know what your financial obligations are going to be associated with that project. Nikki, if you could give a quick overview of what we've talked about to the CIP and the financial phases, I think that gets us into our third and final phase.
Yep, let me just share my screen here. Correct screen, although this one is sideways, so I'm not sure you guys are going to be able to see that. Is that upright for you guys, or is it sideways?
It's upright, but it's awfully small.
Yep.
Okay. You guys can zoom in as well on your side. On the left side of your preview screen, you should be able to zoom in because it starts to cut off on my screen.
For me, it's right below all the videos.
Okay, so are we okay to talk through it, or do you want me to switch to a different screen?
No, it looks good for me. And it's also the email that you just sent
Yes,
to us, right?
I sent it right as the meeting was starting. I sent it so you have a PDF copy. If you would like to see that on a different view, that is fine as well.
You can increase the percentage right at the top.
Yeah, mine cuts off if I increase the percentage, but you all should be able to individually increase your percentage so you can see it. Okay, so as AJ was talking about, so the impetus of this came up during CIP because obviously we have some big projects coming up, and the question was raised about what that does to our legal debt margin. And full transparency, we want to make sure you guys saw this as well, so I apologize, Adam and Bridget, this is going to be kind of a repeat of what you've already seen. But it's a very valid point, and from a financial perspective, important information to have and be aware of. But to hopefully give you some comfort of this is what this would mean if worst case scenario, all of these big 4 referendum projects go through. This is what that looks like from a referendum perspective. So all this is doing, the legal debt margin, for those of you that are not super familiar with that, it's based on 5% of the full assessed value of property in Urbandale. So our debt limit, this is as of this current fiscal year. We just got the 22, so it'll be updated. So it goes up every year. So this is literally a snapshot in time. It'll continue to go up, but our current legal debt limit is 5% of that assessed value. So $311 million in outstanding debt is what we can have at any given time. That is the legal limit. So the things that I currently have outstanding as of the beginning of the fiscal year, I have 69 million, that'd be great, 69,000, $69 million in debt sitting out there right now. We plan to pay off here in June. We pay off 11 million, one of that, and then we turn around and reissue about 12.4 based on the current CIP. So that gives us a remaining balance for the current fiscal year that we already know about and are already setting in motion, right? So the other piece to take into account, our fiscal performance goals, we set back 30% of our legal debt margin for emergencies. Whatever that emergency is to be defined, that would be a council decision, like think natural disaster, like big time emergency, not just, hey, there's a great project that we would like to do. That's not what that would be intended for. So that takes a huge amount off the top. And I point that out because this is a number based on a policy. We haven't issued that. So it's always still truly there as far as our legal debt margin. We will never hit our legal debt margin because of this policy. So that's good news. But what I wanted to do is go through, okay, worst case scenario, if the complex at full cost comes out at $43 million, this is what I've got left. If all of the Merle Hay Investment District stuff related to the Bucks Arena, the full value, which we already know can't be $26 million because of interest rates, we would issue some lesser amount. But this is the max. If things turn around by the time that goes, it could be $26 million. The police building referendum, which included the parking. So that page in CIP is kind of what prompted this, that all of a sudden it's not $6 million, it could be up to $36 million. So we wanted to show worst case scenario. If we needed to do that, which is still years out, this is super preliminary, but if it happens, this is what that would mean. As well as we have the fire station, 41 relocation, new building expansion, whatever that may be. It's in there at 7. Originally, I put it in at 8 because we don't have land for that, but I thought, let's just make sure it matches the CIP. So this matches everything that's in the CIP. And then based on that CIP for the years that these items are shown, I wanted to show you, here's what the CIP says. I will issue a new bonds, and then how much I'm scheduled to pay off. New bonds, pay off, new bonds, pay off. So at the end of through fiscal 26, based on everything that we have predicted or planned for at this time, you would still be looking at $18 million in legal debt margin after the 30% is taken off, which is 6%. It gives me anxiety because I'm a super conservative finance person. That's what you pay me to do, is to be anxious about that. But I wanted to make sure that we could show the CIP of this is what that would mean. Do I think this is going to happen? No, not to this extent, probably not. But technically, yes, we could make all 4 of those projects go. Are we going to do that in some fashion? It will all change by the time we get out there. But technically, yes, it could happen. So that was what the ask was, is to present this. And I wanted to make sure you guys have seen that. The CIP is just a planning document. We absolutely know that. This is not set in stone by any means, but we wanted to pro forma that out for you because the CIP is, at its core, that's our planning document. So as AJ said, the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 thing, phase 1 has to conclude, so we have a yes or no, because phase 2 related to the community rec complex and all of these, phase 2 will happen. It just may be different. If the vote is a no, well, now we know there's no building, so now we have to still plan all the ancillary. So phase 2 just changes direction, so the CIP needs to react to that. So when we start that process, which is in August of 23, we'll know the answer. Do we have authorization to do a building or not? So that's why the vote piece is important. Finish up phase 1 so we know what phase 2 and phase 3 look like for that regional park area. Something is going out there. We just need to know if it's a building or not so we can plan around that. So that will kind of help us go into that. And by the time, AJ, I'm repeating what he already said, we don't need to know about numbers and bidding, and we are so far from debt. There's no way it would happen before next spring of 24, before we would be talking about a debt number. So it's just really early to predict what that would be, but we do need to be able to run into that phase 2 process so my CIP can reflect that, and that rolls into all of your budget and everything else. So there's just a lot of cascade effects that happen with that. So I wanted to make sure that you can see what this looks like, but the reality of when those decisions have to be made are still quite a bit into the future, and we don't know what we don't know. The rates look terrible right now, 100%. They've changed a lot. But all of the data saying we need to get authorization first, so I know, are we moving forward with this one? And if bids come in and they're terrible, you can hold off. The great thing about it, which we, as AJ started to talk about this, is we've only done a couple of these, and we've never had a bond referendum that we aren't ready to pull the trigger right now. We aren't in that position this time. So if you get authorization, let it go to the vote, get the authorization. We can sit on that till the environment looks good. If bids come in bad, you have to be able to reject bids. It's kind of different scenario. I compared it to the Warren County courthouse decision. They passed the vote. They went out for bid. Oh my God, it's way over budget. They went out for referendum again to ask for more, and the voters said no, so they had to go revise it. It took 5 years to get through that process. So there's nothing saying that you have authorization and you have to pull the trigger immediately. Our bond council, I don't recommend this method, but they have one that's a huge water project that is authorization from 20 years ago. It passed 20 years ago to build this thing, and it just takes that long to get a huge project like this going. And so as long as the council has not killed the project, permanently table it and say, hey, we're no longer interested in this, then you would lose that authorization. But as long as we're moving forward, there's no deadline. So I guess that's kind of my point, is we've never really been in this scenario that we were not ready to go with the building or the project or the whatever we're doing a referendum for. And so this one is kind of unique. So those are the points that I wanted to make sure and outline from a financial perspective. This is the black and white. Absolutely. It would take up a huge chunk of our legal debt margin if all 4 of these projects at maximum that are currently in the CIP went. And I just wanted to make sure that full transparency, you guys all saw this since we only presented that to the CIP subcommittee piece. So can I answer questions on that? Any clear as mud items? I apologize since some of you have already seen this, but I'll shut up now and you can ask questions.
Nikki, in our history in the last 20 years, have we ever had a legal debt margin, assuming all these things go forward, have we ever had a legal debt margin remaining of 6%? Has that occurred before?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
No.
What would be the
Our highest
number, or highest, whatever?
Well, our highest outstanding debt at any given time has been about $84 million, which has actually just happened this last year. But keep in mind, our annual issuances are normally less than $10 million, and we haven't been under 10 for the last 5 years. So the size and scope of the projects that we're doing, just base CIP stuff, have been much higher. So our outstanding debt is as high as it's ever been, but we have been continuously, remember, paying off. So I've been retiring. I retired $8 million in advance last time, or here this last June. $4 million, that's supposed to be coming up. I'm not doing that now. So our outstanding debt continues to grow. It has not ever been this high. The last time we did a referendum that actually had debt associated with it, other than the fire station, the new one, would have been the library, which was before me. So more than 17 years ago.
So
everything dollar-wise, no, not even close.
And my quick follow-up then, too, when it comes to this particular piece of it, again, assuming, let's say we do move forward with all these, is there a negative impact with our ability to bond? Does that hurt our interest rates when we have this much outstanding debt? Like, what is there any long-term negative impacts with having that much debt carried? It's a question for the bond rating agency. They've always said for our size of community, we actually don't have a big enough amount of debt out there in the market to go to the higher classification, which seems super contrary to the conservative nature of most people's thinking. I assume that we would maintain as long as we have good fund balances and we have levy capacity. So we can support these items with the levy. Can the debt levy stay where it's at? No, it can't. This would end up resulting in more levy because you've voted on a levy increase that goes along with each of these. So that's the thing to remember, is this will automatically increase your levy no matter what project you do, because that's what the authorization is giving you, is saying, I'm going to issue $43 million worth of debt. That's where that $119 a month or a year, property tax impact is, because I need to increase their levy to pay for that debt. So there is an impact as far as the levy. Yes, it would go up if you're not, because this is in addition to other CIP that is the normal. So yes and no. I mean, it's not going short of you run out of money. As long as when I go to Moody's, right, every year we go to Moody's before we sell the debt, they evaluate what's your fund balance, how much levy capacity do you have, which we have a ton. Even though we're at 810 on that, there are tons of other levies that we don't even touch. So they take all of that into account. If it got down to 6%, like in a period of a couple of years, they would probably start having a freak out. But we have a long-term CIP that they see what the plan is, and we start talking to them immediately. They ask at every annual meeting, what's your planned issuances for the next 5 years? So we've already told them all of this, and they know it's coming. So I would say our plans and conservative approach, we just have to get them comfortable with it, just like we would get you comfortable with it. As long as we can pay the bills on it, they're effectively like the council. If we can pay the bills, they're good to go too. I don't believe it would have a negative impact as far as our rates or our rating. I don't think it would have that effect unless this was completely unplanned.
I guess quick on that, Nikki, is the outlier in this is the police department. We haven't gone to rating since the $30-ish million increase there.
Correct.
Okay.
But it would be in our referendum items because it's not in our planned issuance. That referendum is broken out separately for them. So we identify what referendums we've got coming up. Correct that the draft from last year's CIP had $6-ish million in there. So now we're talking about 36. So that will be with a grain of salt, with just like everything else. This is totally a prelim number. We don't know that 36 is out there, but if it's in the document, we'll have to talk to them about it, and we will have to go through and explain this is a known issue. We're going to have to deal with this one way or the other. It may not be a $36 million bill. It may be something else, but we're really premature in talking about what that is. But as long as they know we're, like I said, conservative, we put the whole thing in there because this is a big decision. We're going to have to deal with this. It needs to be aware that it's out there. So yes, we will talk to them about that and see what concerns they have. But as long as we can, like I said, pay the bill, it's relatively minor impact for them.
I would also add that, as Nikki mentioned, when we go to Moody's and we explain all the nuances of our financials, our capabilities, our growth, our capital projects, we do explain that it's something like the police department, something like this that had been previously identified. It's a planning document. It is subject to change to so many criteria that 36 may be significantly less. It may be pushed out. It is in our out years. And much like Fire Station 43, it was in our out years for a number of years that identified that at some point we are considering building the third fire station. Then the community, the CIP, and the council concurred that they wanted to accelerate that, but it was a known item, and we made that work within the CIP document. I'd also point out, because I know there's been a couple questions raised, is that the Merle Hay project is out there. And I will tell you that we're in a critical phase of negotiations and discussions now, that within the next 6 months, we will know what our obligation is. Whatever that obligation is counts against our debt limit. However, the structure of the project has always been predicated on an outside revenue source satisfying the debt that is associated with that project. And so again, that has been ongoing for almost 3 years now, and the council has had a very strong interest in that project. And again, it would count against whatever dollar amount we issue will count against our debt. But it is also, as you explained to Moody's and Matt, your question about how it may or may not affect our bond rating, is that you demonstrate an outside funding source that, of course, as issued by the city, the full faith and tax credit behind it is behind it as a safety net. The structure of the deal would be that you would have, as the legislation authorized, the capturing of sales tax that satisfies that debt. And again, we are in those critical phases of negotiations that within the next 6 months, by February actually, but within the next 6, we will know what our obligations will be.
I have one more question on this particular piece, and then I'll stop and at least have this part. And I think it might be impossible to game out, but I do have to ask the question. With the legislature talking about property tax cuts, even freezing property tax rates, things of that nature, would that impact our ability to do things of this nature, or is that these levies separate from anything of that nature?
This is a separate levy. So debt service levy has always been excluded. They will go after potentially any of the other ones. So your general levy, that's the one that they have the cap on. So if you remember the lovely publication we have to do first, that's the max rate levy hearing, debt is not even included on that, because they have to allow us to be able to issue debt and deal with those independently, because we've sold those to the public market. They can't put limits on those because it has debt backing it. So I would feel pretty comfortable saying that they're not going to touch a debt service levy. They may mess with your general levy, and that's what they've attempted to do in the past with the caps on you can only grow so much, or you have to get specific supermajority authorization to go over the 2%. They've already messed with that, and debt has been outside of that always.
Nikki, couldn't they, though, for future debt issues, I mean, there's nothing to stop them from placing some, whatever restrictions could be on future debt issue though, right? Applicable to all.
They would probably have to have a completely different levy because you have cities that issue 20-year bonds for something, and so those core underlying, I think they would have to create something completely different because they can't put an arbitrary cap. They have no idea. You know, we set our debt levy. Keep in mind, we do ours based on I want a debt levy to be X, not I have debt service this year and tell me what that is going to be. Most cities back into that number. We set ours and work into how much debt can I service. So you have a bond that was sold for 20 years and that particular community needs to issue a certain amount of levy every year to support that. That's a legal obligation. So that is what I don't think. Now they could do it into something else. You're 100% right from here forward, but they couldn't mess with this existing one for anything that was already authorized.
Okay.
And we would have that authorization based on the referendum day. So I would assume that once it's authorized, they have authorized that. That's considered an outstanding authorization. So I would assume it wouldn't be able to be touched. But they could prove me wrong on that, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yes, that's why I don't feel that they can make any to the existing debt levy as it stands today would have to remain intact because that represents a legal obligation.
But Matt, back to your point, a very good point, that the legislature could change the playing field in any number of ways.
Absolutely.
Even if the debt service may not be changed, there could be some other changes that would negatively impact our fiscal position that would have maybe an indirect impact on this as well. So,
correct.
Including local option sales tax, go on down the line. So, good point.
Yep.
Yeah, I know that, Matt, you may remember last year, I know you were connected with the legislative activities, that one of the things that really tempered the discussion on local option sales tax was a number of communities that had pledged local option sales tax to retire debt. And that really resonated, as I understand, through the legislative process to say, we've issued debt for, pick a number, for a dollar amount and for a time period, and we're using this voter-authorized local option sales tax to satisfy that debt and to be that funding source. So as I recall hearing that was a key discussion point in their loss discussions. And I would agree with Nikki. I would hope that would be something that they would recognize, that as communities grow and need the capital projects, whether they be things like this, whether they be roadways, whether they be whatever, that they understand the value to communities and the ability to do those projects.
One of the questions I have, just for clarifying purposes, is $119 increased property tax annually. How many years do we anticipate that would be for?
That is proposed on a 20-year bond issuance. And if it's a physical building, we normally would do 20 years. That's what we predicted with the fire station, and we only ended up issuing for 15 because the rates were really good. So that there's two pieces in that 119. So that includes operational, the anticipated subsidy, as well as paying for the debt for the 20 years. So at 20 years, that piece would drop off. The debt portion would drop off, and it becomes just whatever the operational subsidy would be.
And okay, so if phase one passes, they say yes, go out. We're authorized to spend up to $40 million, $43 million, whatever the case may be. And we are looking at it as a council and we say, gosh, you know what, we need to scale back this project, or this amount is still not favorable given what the legislature has done, given whatever projects are still coming down. Do we have the ability to scale that back, or are we now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, that is the not to exceed number. So in my Warren County example, there is, they pass it for X amount. Well, they go out to bid and realize it's twice that. So they went back to the community. So we would have that opportunity to say, oh my gosh, what we wanted to build is actually $60 million. You could go back out and ask. Warren County said no. They had to scale back their project and then they ended up cutting it even further from that. So we could say $43 million, we've got authorization that not to exceed that. I can issue $10 million if I need to, if that's all you want to do. I think that is 100% in your court once we get the authorization, yes or no, you want a building or not. Because if they say yes, then we go through and do the design and get construction drawings and get ready to go to bid. That's where you also then you're still in control of what is the ultimate project look like. The authorization is just for how much debt can I issue to support it.
And at that
Makes
point,
sense?
and then at that point, we can take in consideration like what's been done for public or private fundraising.
Absolutely, right.
Amounts.
Right. Because once you have a design, I mean, kind of thinking back, it's opposite of like what West Des Moines, they have somebody coming in and saying, hey, would you build this for us? Here's $25 million of support, or the Grimes project, those kind of things. This is, we need a core building. If the bids come in and say, geez, to do that core building, that would be great, except it's $60 million. So do we need help to even build the base building? Or, hey, this is it's $5 million to add the pickleball court. Somebody want to come put their name on that. Those kind of things, it gives you something to actually work on from that. You absolutely, the advocacy group is ready, raring to go as soon as the question gets approved on January 10th, and I know Jan can talk all about those pieces of the 30, 40 people that we've got in that advocacy group, what they're going to do to get through that, to get that interest going so that we can identify some of those donors, because absolutely that's going to come on board. But if we don't have the authorization to even issue something, we can't really ask for donations for something that there's no authorization for the core building to even be built. So that's kind of this chicken and the egg thing, but phase 2 is where all of those financial impacts of how much money have we raised, can we expand the project, or is that netting against what the total project is? That's a decision for council. So if we magically get a $2 million mid-am check, you decide, do you want now me to only issue $41 million and that $2 million is taken off your total, or do you want to do a $45 million building? That's a decision for you guys to go through, but we need the authorization to know what to plan for. That's ultimately the base question here.
And then one more question.
Absolutely.
Dan, do you have a sense of target for fundraising?
And again, as Nikki had said, that once you get authorization and you start getting the design built, then you know of how much the project will be. Once you bid it out, then you have the opportunity to bridge any potential gaps. So we certainly have every intention of going out and doing that. And as Nikki said, then a decision by council, does that supplement or does that sustain what you subsidize what you want to do?
I guess my question is
that
like,
amount.
Sure. I think my question is more like, do you have a realistic idea of how much we'll be able to fundraise for this project at this point?
I guess we don't, because we know if we're saying it's 43 million, but when we bid it, all of a sudden it comes in at 50. Maybe it's 10 million that we raise. If we haven't, there's intentions of doing the fundraising, but what amount will be more of what do we want to do? Do we want to do 8 courts instead of 4? I've heard from the pickleball community of saying, hey, we might have potential of raising some funds. Let's make sure we do as much. So there's no set amount as of right now. A lot will be depending on the bidding climate and as this gets designed.
Jan, related to the fundraising piece as well, and this is something that's been on my mind, and this is not meant to be a slight toward you or anybody in Parks and Rec, but again, you aren't full-time professional fundraisers. Is there something that we as council would need to assist with, some sort of resources to have a third party or some type of entity to assist in that with the fundraising? Again, if we come through these conversations, we want a $15 million raise to try to offset parts of costs or increase costs. Do you think that would be something that we as council should be considering?
And that's certainly actually we have a sponsorship policy that just having legal review it now and we'll be bringing that to you. That's that first step. And then we'll be certainly looking at what is our best approach here so we can put our best foot forward and get the most potential of donors. So yes, that would be something that we anticipate bringing to you as council. I don't have a specific answer what that looks like. All those pieces, and as Nikki said, if we do have time here, I certainly can share of what participated from here forward, but that is certainly one of those tools in the toolbox or pieces that as we go forward, that's certainly something that we'd be bringing to you as council.
Hey, Nikki, at what point does the levy go into effect? So at $119, does that go in after we have approved the issuance of?
Not till you issue the bonds. So we typically sell in April. So for reference, the budget that we're getting ready to set, and we'll have our meeting with, I will give you here's the levy that we need to do for this year. That kicks in July 1. That takes into account the bonds that I anticipate issuing in April of 23. Sorry. So these would be next budget if all goes perfectly and we do bids in the winter of 23. We'll know what that number is. It's part of the CIP. It will become part of that issuance if we're ready to do construction in 24. That April of 24 bond issuance, I would set the levy and that would kick in July 1 of 24. So it's all driven based on when do you want to sell the bonds. When that first payment is due, that's the first time I need to collect levy, right? So it's all tied to, this is not locking you into to raising the levy now. It's absolutely not in the budget that I'm getting ready to bring to you. It will be in the next one because we issue in the spring and the first payment isn't due until the next spring. Does that make sense? So you've got a full year of headway on the levy piece.
So Nikki, and I'm not proposing this at this point in time, but it's in the back of my mind. Because you mentioned that because we can sit, as soon as we get authorization, we can maybe sit on this a while so there is not a particular rush.
Correct.
So if we move the date of the election to a more politically expedient time, would that push the levy would that push that a year back then when we would issue the bond for this then?
The answering the question, so to be frank, it will have a much bigger impact cascade on the CIP because now I have no idea what to expect. The benefit, or it's more detrimental, I would say, like, hey, you want to wait do it until September? Well, we're already working on CIP. So if I don't have the answer as you want a building or you don't want a building, that affects all of the projects in the CIP, and it would push back the referendums on any other potential buildings, the ones that I had laid out earlier, because you don't do them back to back, or we haven't historically. So I think that is probably more detrimental. I'd rather have we know yes or no. So phase 2 of planning, what does that look like? Because if it wouldn't pass now, then we know there's no building, but we're still going to do all the other ancillary things out there. So now the CIP needs to be adjusted to reflect, okay, they didn't want a building. That's what would happen. We would still do all of the other things, or what does that look like at that location? So from a planning perspective, pushing it back to a more favorable time, the other impact would be is now we missed our bid window because once we have a referendum in March, it passes, the design company immediately gets started on finishing. So we've got pretty conceptual design, but this is like bid spec ready design is the next in phase 2. So they have to do all of that. That is anticipated to be ready for the winter 23 into 24 bidding season. So if we don't have a vote until September, for example, or the midterm elections, well, now I'm a full year out because I missed the bidding window of when we would bid a project like that. So there are lots of ramifications, yes, but 100% what you just said, we can sit on it. If you do the referendum in March and it passes, you have that authorization to move whenever you want to move. But at least it lets us as staff plan scenario that if the environment's totally yucky, we don't want to do it in the winter 23 or into 24 bid season, and you choose not to do that, that's 100% fine. The CIP will go ahead and recognize that, are there other things I can go ahead and start working on it? If I know a footprint has to be there for a building and we leave that, but you could go ahead and put in the regional playground. You could put in the splash pad or whatever, the flushable restroom, something that has to be out there to support that anyway.
but it helps me know, okay, there's going to be a building and I need a big old parking lot because whatever goes in first, I need a parking lot. But if there's never going to be a building because we didn't get the authorization, well, now I would revise the whole plan for Walnut Creek Regional Park because it would be laid out differently. Like if there's not the footprint of a building, why would I put the pickleball courts all the way up here? We will reorganize to do that. So knowing is better in our world. The ability to plan is we have to know the authorization is there or not. So we know how to plan the next 2 or 3 years worth of CIP projects. So that's my long answer to, yeah, there is detrimental issues with pushing it back, and you lose all the momentum that we've already gone through. You did all of these community surveys. I mean, to be frank, we've spent $215,000 so far on planning and surveys that all support. If there's a time to do it, it's now. We have scientific surveys saying that was true. If we wait, now that's more than a year old. It's probably not valid anymore. We'd have to start over.
And of those 4 projects, Nikki, right now, only 2 of them would require bond referendum, right? That would be the police station and the Uplex.
Well, firewood, anything except Merle Hay, any city building is a referendum.
So we could be potentially looking at trying to get folks to vote on 3 different projects within a relatively short window of time when you consider the past 20 years of Urbandale, right?
Correct. We've never had 3 back-to-back facility referendums ever.
Well,
that's why we stagger them out. So we try not to do them back-to-back.
the fire and police could potentially be one referendum, though.
Yeah, I was gonna bring
As long as it's the same building.
Yeah.
If they are not at the same location, nope, they have to be separate questions. You can ask them at the same time, but they have to be separate.
Seeing I've built a joint facility, seeing Waukees building a joint facility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dealer. Another question I kind of had as well is user groups. So if I look at, like you mentioned, Grimes has a built-in user group. Johnston has a built-in user group. West Des Moines has multiple user groups. Do we have any target of renter user groups that are expected in this, or is this all free play in essence?
Yeah, I mean, I can weigh in here. Essentially, it certainly is a different model that we have. I mean, West Des Moines, it wasn't something in their planning document as ours has been since 2006. An entity came to them, same as Grimes. So certainly a different model that we are proceeding with and that we have followed in the last number of years is it's not a user group initiating. It's a community, our master plans, our community input. This is a community complex. So it would be a service to the community. It's not we have $20 million, somebody coming to say, build it and we want to use a part of it. No, that's not the model that has initiated this project. The community feedback over the last 15 years has.
And then I guess as far as the other groups, they got the fundraising dollar side, but they've got also the user renter side. Do we have any potential renters that we're thinking of with this?
No, I mean, what amenities that are being proposed are not set for user group, it's for community use. So certainly, yes, we plan to rent the gyms for different events, and we plan to rent the community rooms and so forth. But in regards to a consistent one, that's not the intention or the model that we've said, because the community wants to use it. Just as if the school would have a gym and somebody would come in and we're always using 2 of the 4 of your gyms, or the G. Vanetti shelter of there's somebody that's coming in every Saturday and Sunday, then it's not a community facility. So again, that's not the intent or the model that we've developed for this complex.
Okay. And then I had one quick question on the bond piece too, Nikki. We're going to hammer a lot on bonds, I guess. So if we say yes on a vote, we go out and issue $10 million for the beginning phases, but delay the other $30 million, we'll say. Is there a timeline where the remainder of that authority has to happen? Is it a 20 years from initial issue?
No, there's no, correct. It can hang out there as long as you're still considering it an active project. So I specifically asked Eric Buller with Allers that question to make sure that I was not misremembering how that worked. You have authorization based on a positive referendum vote. So how you choose, you don't have to issue it all at the same time. You can do exactly as you said. And as long as council hasn't come through to say, we're going to issue 10 million, the rest of it, we're done. This is all we're going to build. Then the authorization is done with whatever you chose to build if you say the project is over. So as long as it stays alive and, okay, this is the first phase, we're going to move the dirt, get it all graded, put the parking lot in, and these first three little things, and the rest of it's going to be down the road. As long as it's down the road, you're good to go. Like I said, the 20-year example, and they haven't built anything yet with that, but the authorization still exists.
But then the counter is how we write the question of anything in the question has to be built, if that's issued, correct? So if we say we're building a community center, we have to build a community center at some point.
No, you do not.
Okay.
It can adapt to it, just like you have the authorization to issue $43 million with this intent. So you go through and you do your design, and here's what it comes out to be. Well, that's not what we're able to do. As long as the concept is still there. I mean, if it changes so much that it becomes a legal question, we may have to have that discussion. I don't think you should have we're going to issue $43 million. All I'm going to do is put in a playground. That's it. Walk away. I think the community might have a little heartburn over that. But if the scope's changed, the scope changes what you're talking about, right?
Right, because like with the schools, when they went for the two elementaries, they had to build two elementaries no matter what.
School is under a different code section, and we clarified that too. He said when a school bond referendum goes out, this is your directive. You shall build what you said you were going to build. School is different in that respect. So you don't have to. That's why we have the shelf life of whenever you get to it. A school referendum is your decree, and in a very expedient manner, whatever the legalese expedient is, they have to do that, or the authorization is done. So there is a very distinct difference, and he pointed it out. I don't do school stuff. I know you have a lot more exposure to that than what I do, but school is a directive. A city is authorization for something in that conceptual, because it's going to change, it's such a long timeline. A school does authorization at a different time. They also do a lot of different prep work for it.
Yep. Yeah, difference of home rule.
Yes. It is very different. That's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. It is not a directive like it is for a school.
I'm going to jump in here. I've kind of kept quiet today, surprisingly. I feel a lot better after listening to Nikki on my anxiety related to the bonding portion of the questions that we had, but my anxiety has existed on several levels over the last couple of weeks on this project. And as you all know, I mean, I'm sitting here likely because of my advocacy for amenities at Walnut Creek Regional Park. So this is something that is very near and dear to my heart. As you all know, I take my role as the representative of Dallas County Urbandale. We all represent them, but as the only person that lives there, I take that very seriously. And I want to make sure that this bond referendum passes. And so I want all of you to be on board with this project, whether you're doing that. I mean, obviously we can't as a group advocate for this, but personally, I want everyone to feel comfortable with what we're doing. And, we've been at this a long time, and, a pool project, I feel, got put aside to do the fire station number 43. And clearly that also benefited significantly residents of Dallas County. I chaired that bond referendum support committee. But now is the time for this project. And public safety is incredibly important in our community. Obviously, it's our number one priority, and we have a lot of stuff coming down the pike on that I know our community will support. I feel very strongly that our community will support that, but I feel like we have to do this now. And the more that I heard from Nikki, you know, we have to get this authorization now, and then we can say, let's not, you know, do the project until we have $10 million in the bank, if that's what we decide makes us feel more comfortable with fundraising. But this is, I started my advocacy, and I hate keeping bringing this up, and I hate this analogy, but I started my advocacy for getting an aquatic center basically saying we need to poop or get off the pot with this concept of having an aquatic center at Walnut Creek Regional Park, because the realtors are still telling people that we're going to have a pool out here. So that was 10 plus years ago. And I feel like our scientifically valid surveys have said this is the time to do this, and we need to give the community a chance to be heard on this. And if they don't pass it, then we figure out how we can piecemeal some amenities at the park. I mean, literally, big victory, we got flushable toilets. We still have no, you know, non-school related public facilities to have indoor, to have a meeting, voting, you name it. There's nothing in Urbandale that isn't a school. And so I still have some anxiety about the next couple of months and what our plan, not our plans, what the committee's plans are. I've had a chance to talk to Mary a little bit, and I know they have big plans, but I will say that I am very concerned that none of the names that I have been given are people that live in Dallas County. Everybody needs to support this project, but we need to make sure that everybody in Dallas County knows about this and is supporting it just as much as Polk County, but we've got to have some folks from Dallas County helping to lead the charge and have ownership. We've got great members on our Parks Board from Dallas County that I'd love to see engaged in this. So I still have a lot of angst about this, but I think our time is now, after listening to Nikki, just getting that authorization and then figuring it out. But it is very important to me that we do some significant fundraising after listening to Jan's presentation, the meeting before Christmas, and seeing some of our other metro facilities in person and in planning phases. I think we have to do significant fundraising in hopes that we can bring that cost down and possibly do some enhancements. So with that, I will shut up, but I had to get all that in for you.
I would say I feel a lot more comfortable after today as well. I do think we need to make sure we leave the option open if there are user groups that are committed to using this space that we could leverage. I think we'd be foolish not to look at that as a potential long-term opportunity as well. And I like the idea we can hold off if bids are terrible. Like we're not beholden to spend public dollars at this moment in time.
Yeah, if I may, I think that's really critical as we talked internally, that authorization is just that the control shifts from the vote to the council. And that's important because we have been faced in the past with bids that have come in. We've laid out our CIP, we were going to do XYZ projects, and bids have come in astronomical. And I can remember maybe 4 or 5 years ago, cost of concrete was just, it went through the roof unexpectedly. So the council shelved several CIP projects until we had a chance, because it was last minute. It was after we had done the CIP document and before we made any final financial commitments. We knew that through the bid process. So again, that really is the key thing of this, because we do so few of these, is that it now shifts. It shifts from voter authorization to council control and management of the project, financially and structurally.
And this is Jan, and I know it's at 1 o'clock, but if I can just have 1 minute that I can respond, or Bridget, and I in regards to getting the entire community involved, I just, as you as a council and mayor, want to reassure you, we've been doing a lot behind the scenes, and since September, we have been meeting with key community members, east, west, different age groups, with kids, no kids. The core group that I know that you referenced, Bridget, is a group of 5 individuals doing the main work of working with the state in getting the required paperwork to do the campaign and starting to raise funds for that campaign. That's certainly separate than what the city does. We have 25 to 35 people that we've been meeting with and keeping involved and sharing information that are poised and ready. If and when next Tuesday that the council says, yes, let's set the vote for March 7th, we have been working with RDG. We have a communications marketing strategy that is set. In January, these are all the things we're doing. In February, these are all the things. We have 10 community presentations already scheduled and plan a lot more once we get this rolling. So as was mentioned, this is a key pivotal point in the process and certainly a big decision by you as council. Once we hit that, we have a strategy and a whole plan, marketing plan set. And certainly the intention, this needs to be community driven. This can't be staff driven. Certainly we need the high support of council and staff, but this group is ready to roll and are poised to do that.
Jan, that's really helpful information to know too, so thank you.
She can share that with you too if you would like the just so you're aware too. I'm sure we can get that out to you in here's the known dates we've gotten as they come through, so that you guys are aware of it and can visit some of them too.
Yeah, we've got a set marketing plan. I'll be happy to send that out this afternoon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jan.
All right, I'll say this just because I know we're running out of time, but this is a big subject, and I'm just going to vocalize it so I can at least have it out to the other council members. I'm concerned about the date. I want this to move through. I just feel that with the next 2 months, I know there's a lot of community, there's going to be a lot of outreach, but we're going to have, I'm just thinking the political winds as they go. We're going to have a lot of people up at the Capitol talking about property tax cuts. We're going to have a lot of people talking about turning their eye towards cities, and we're going to roll out to our members of our community. Hey, by the way, please vote to raise your property taxes. There is a small part of me, I know it would suck for planning purposes, but it might be more politically expedient to try to get this for the fall, or even tie it to our municipal elections when we would have the largest amounts of turnout, where we might be able to have a significant impact with people one way or the other. If the majority of the council next week thinks that March is the time, I will not be the one that torpedoes it. I will vote for it, but I just wanted to at least have my concerns shared, and that this is something that's on the back of my mind, and I'm just trying my best to set this up for the best passage. Because yes, there's planning, there's all these things, but we are the entity that's ultimately the political one. We are the one that has the political question, and we are the ones that have talked to voters most recently. Yes, there's a scientific survey, but I think we are the ones that are supposed to have the pulse for this, and that's the thing that concerns me. Again, if the majority of the council thinks March is the time, I will not torpedo it. I will vote for it, but I just wanted my concerns shared.
All right. I've been quiet here, but it's now 1:05. I'm the mayor, and I always get the last word, so I'm going to take the last word. So thank you, everybody, for your input. Again, a lot of good information today, a lot of good questions. You're going to have time to deliberate everything before Tuesday, and I appreciate everybody's opinion on this. I'll just express my opinion and my concerns as well. Again, I've been around a little bit here, and I was mayor when the community center went down in 2007. I saw that, and it was a miserable failure then, frankly. I don't want that to happen again. I'm fully in support of this project. I want to be successful, but it does require a positive vote of the constituents, and that does have some concern for me as well. So there are a lot of headwinds facing us right now. There are always headwinds, and there's never a good time to take something to a vote of the people. That's one thing too. So I'm not saying I'm definitely against this, but I'm just saying we need to consider a lot of things. And I echo some of Matt's comments about whether March is the appropriate time, given some of the headwinds that we're currently facing, to take that to the voters. So we're not going to decide anything today. This is a good information sharing, and thanks for everybody's input. Let's sleep on this for a few days, and we're going to have some good discussion on Tuesday night, and I will respect whatever the council decides on Tuesday night as well, obviously. So with that,
Can I ask a quick question of AJ? Is the next date after March the November election, or was there a September date?
There's September. The legislation changed a couple of years ago, that says you can do a March, you can do a September, and you can do the general election. So you have 3 dates in calendar year 23, Bridget.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. I would also add, if you have any questions, myself, staff, we're here to answer your questions. Prepare any information you'd like to have in advance of your meeting on Tuesday. It will be on the agenda. And again, as you've all discussed, you have some thinking to do. And our job is to give you as much information as possible.
all right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for the time. Thanks for all the information from staff. I know, again, this has been a lot of work so far, and I'm not diminishing that whatsoever, but at the end of the day, we all want this to be a success. So thank you for your time on this today, and we stand adjourned. See you Tuesday. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.